Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome again for another new learning session today. The topic of today is home care and isolation. This will be jointly taken by Dr. Amir Mohammed, uh, Nisha, and Mitu. Dr. Amir is currently working as a resident physician in Fortis Hospital, Cunningham Road. He has been treating wide array of patients, including COVID, both online and offline. So we will also get to hear a lot of his experience today. And along with, we have Nisha and Mitu, who have been our core BNP volunteers and doing an excellent job during this COVID time. We will hear out on the topic of home care and isolation, which is very important, right? Not everybody needs hospitalization in the current context. And how does one take care of it and avoid hospitalization and leave it for the real emergency and the needy cases? Yeah, over to you, Mitu and Nisha.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I will like to begin the session with an experience that I had when I joined BNP as a volunteer in the COVID situation. So I got a personal reference of a friend's colleague whose another relative in Bangalore was affected with COVID, and I thought I will lend my help. So I was new to all of this, and so when the attender called, what happened was the attender definitely was in a panic situation, and he wanted some immediate help. So all he kept saying is that my father is unwell and I want to do something for him. My father is unwell, I want to do something for him. So I said, yeah, so let's find out what can be done. And I myself panicked before I could even realize. And once you are in panic, then the panic keeps multiplying. That is what happens. So I also started rushing in my mind to think, okay, what look for some hospitals, look for some ICU beds and this and that, without even checking out what was the condition of the patient. And yes, they landed up into the hospital. They stayed there in the hospital for like 5-6 days, only to realize that the doctor himself came and said that whatever that we are doing, you can try doing this at home itself. Your saturation is not bad. You can stay at home and you can learn how to take care of yourself even at home. So then 5 days later, they came back home, and by then even I had kind of gained some amount of confidence, and I helped them to get a concentrator at home, get some amount of nurse and doctor consultations. And then that's when my realization went to this point where I got to learn that there are so many other options available rather than running to the hospital. Definitely we get into some sort of fear because of the media, because of all the other people that we see around, and we also start fearing. But if somewhere we are able to come out of this crux and we learn to get help from the right kind of people, a lot of these cases can be tackled at home itself. So with this, I will ask Nisha to open up the slide and show.
Thank you, Mitu. So this is a real life story, and I think all of us have gone through this in the early days. Now, hopefully, we have become more aware and we can manage this illness in a better way. So it is really important that we do not panic, as she said, and we reach out for proper medical advice rather than homemade remedies, which are not proven and can cause more damage than good. We grab every straw because we're so anxious about COVID, especially when your dear ones are affected. And these rumors are spread from social media, friends, relatives, news, all sorts of tips and do's and don'ts, which sometimes may cause, like we said, more damage. And unfortunately, too many people think they can recover on their own, try these remedies, and come to us when it's too late. And we really can't do anything much at that point of time. So what we really recommending is start early. COVID can be taken care of in most cases at an early stage. And from the data, you can see that more than 80% of cases are mild. And if you take care of it like a flu at home, but take the necessary precautions and protocols with proper medical advice, monitoring, and treatment, you can come out of it. And the first 5 to 10 days are really the most important, with making sure that the precautions can be considered so that you can overcome this phase before it becomes more serious. So this is whether you want to use Ayurveda, homeopathy, that's fine, but do go to a doctor and get proper medical advice and monitoring and supervision. That is really important. Uh, and think not just about your own recovery, or tell the, spend time with the attenders or the patients if you meet, to help them understand the risk of spread to those in their family. And because otherwise the entire household can get affected, and it's just going to keep spreading the disease, and that can be very traumatic. I mean, we've seen cases where the entire families have had it, and some of them finally not with very positive outcomes. So let's really take precaution, prevention, and start early. That is the learning that we get as we see more and more patients rushing for beds when it's just too late to help them. So today we are much more fortunate. We have a lot of knowledge. We have understanding of how this works and what works, what doesn't work. And the government has established guidelines on how to treat COVID more effectively at home. There's simple precautions, protocols. Proning is one technique which can avoid people rushing for oxygen support at early phases. We see many people just want to rush to buy a cylinder, buy a concentrator. Sometimes they get scammed by deals in the which are because of the scarcity. And then sometimes they may use oxygen when they don't have the knowledge or the capability. So unless there is proper supervision support, we should try to enforce that people follow basic protocols and guidelines. So from my experience in working with some of the volunteers, and seeing some of the cases that have come, we've tried to help them with getting, firstly, doctor consultation. That's really the most critical. So helping the doctor to validate, is this a mild case, a moderate case, a severe case? Do they really need to go to the hospital? Can they avoid going to the hospital? Can they avoid the unnecessary cost, trauma, expense, anxiety? And can it be really treated at home? And don't self medicate, or have self denial that I can take care of it either. So neither going to one extreme or the other, either anxiety or total self denial that I can take care of it. I've got a lot of immunity, I'm superhuman, and I can just somebody said remdesivir is good, somebody said steroids is good, so let me just pop a pill in my mouth. And there is a particular protocol. If you start too early, it may not have the desired effect. So do follow the doctor's advice and the specific treatment. As we said, isolate yourself. So you don't want your family to get it. You don't want to spread the virus. So even if you have minor symptoms, you're not sure, you're still waiting for the test results. Sometimes the test may or may not give you the accurate result. It may still be negative. But do isolate yourself and stay away from the rest of the family, so that you can pass through those 5 or 10 days before you're actually sure. It may not be COVID, but it's better to isolate yourself. There is a diet, but most importantly, take lots of fluids. Don't dehydrate. There is a dietitian we have who can help you, help the patient, advise them on what to take, what not to take, what salts are important. So we can provide dietary support if patients require. Don't lock yourself in. Mithu was telling me an example where a patient locked herself in and then went to sleep, and the near and dear ones couldn't reach her and thought something had happened to her. So tell the patients not to lock themselves in. They should at the same time get sunlight and fresh air. There was a case, I think, where somebody used an oxygen concentrator and closed the doors, and so they actually died with that because it could not get carbon dioxide to convert into oxygen. So you need fresh air in this ailment, even if you're at home isolating yourself. And most importantly, as we've seen time and again, don't panic. Rushing for oxygen, rushing for ICU bed, that's the major problem that's happening. So there's today so much of support available. The volunteers like you, your main role is to reduce the panic. And then there are so many other conveniences available. You've got people who are willing to supply food at home. You have people who are willing to just talk on the phone and provide counseling support. You have people who can come in and help you do your errands for you. So don't worry, there are enough people who can support you. And we have here, for example, St. Joseph's COVID Care, they will help you with doctors. A lot of free doctors also available if you want a teleconsultation and you can't afford to pay. If you can afford, of course, it's a good idea to pay the doctor who's spending his time supporting you. There is medical kits available. There is food kits available. So there's enough support out there, enough resources that you can use to help you cope with this at home. So the government has put certain guidelines here, very, very simple 10 things that you can do. Stay at home, of course. Don't, a lot of people, they, disappearing sometimes and walking around and spreading the disease. They're so fearful. They don't want anyone to know that they've got COVID. They're not letting, they're not really trying to isolate themselves because they don't want to be pulled and taken to a hospital or taken to a COVID center. So that's only going to worsen the situation. So do stay at home, stay away from the crowd. Monitoring is very important. You need to check your BP, your temperature, your oxygen levels, and be in touch with your doctor so that if there is any change or sudden reduction in oxygen. For example, yesterday we had a patient who came in with 94 and suddenly went down to 40 SpO2. So you need to monitor and you need to see if there is a sudden change for whatever reason in your symptoms, and you need to then call your doctor and get timely treatment. Get rest and stay hydrated, that I've said. Call the doctor, call your provider, and really, if there is an emergency, reach out for the helpline. Wear your mask, cover your cough, your sneeze, don't let it spread. Wash your hands, these are all the basic things. Stay away from people, self-isolate, and avoid sharing personal items. So have your own personal items. If food is being brought to you, make sure it's being cleaned properly with the required, sanitization. Sanitize your house, sanitize your area, sanitize the garbage bags. So there's also a lot of rules around garbage disposal. So there's a lot of detail that's provided by the government on really how to manage this if you're at home. So I guess with that, that's what I would like to say. And we wanted to, if possible, do a short role play. Mitu, do you want to do the role play? I'm not sure if Dr. Amir has joined, because now we'd like, ideally Dr. Amir to share his perspective on the treatment protocols.
No, I've joined.
Okay, you're there. Okay. Dr. Amir, would you like to, take us through this understanding of how to diagnose what the patient is, at what level, and what you suggest are some of the treatment protocols for patients to recover at home?
Yeah, so I think, hi, I'm Dr. Amir. So basically, I think Nisha has covered most of the stuff which you need to follow at home. So basically, the disease classification is based on the oxygen saturation. So mild, moderate, and severe, that is based on the oxygen saturation, which you measure with the pulse oximeter. So depending on whether mild will be when the saturation is more than 94, moderate is 90 to 94, and severe is less than 90. Okay. So based on that, the treatment protocol has been advised. So basically, home care is advised for mild disease. Okay. So what you need to do, I'll give you a list of 5. So the 5 things which you need to do. One is, I think Nisha already covered it anyways. So one is the important is sleep. You need to sleep 8 hours every day. Drink plenty of fluids. That is around at least 3 liters per day. The balanced diet should be taken, which you must have studied in school, I believe. Mainly avoid, also important to avoid sugary items, and then consume a lot of natural vitamins. So make sure you take at least one, meal, or one serving of fruits, vegetables, berries, or yeah. And important to get sunlight as well. I know you can't go outside, but try to get it through the window or somewhere, because vitamin D is also important for that, for recovery. And another thing is exercise. So try to walk around inside the house itself. That will also help. And those are the 5 things I would advise. Then 5 things to avoid are alcohol, smoking, avoid stress, then junk foods, which is processed food, because that increases the body's work to digestion, and your healing process gets delayed. Same thing with sugary drinks. Okay, and what you need to monitor at home, so that the entire time you need to keep in contact with your doctor once you develop these symptoms. And once your symptoms you feel is not improving or it's worsening, or you're getting a fever which is not coming down in 3-4 days, then you need to get a test done or get in touch with the doctor. And preferably you need to get a the pulse oximeter that they'll be providing in most centers nowadays. So with that, you need to monitor your pulse rate and oxygen saturation. So if your pulse rate is more than 120 or your saturation becomes less than 94, then you need to get emergency contact. Another thing you need to note is the respiratory rate, so that you can look at your chest movements or your abdomen movements and count how many times it's moving in a minute. So if that is more than 30, again that is an emergency sign. And ideally you should also look for any you should check for your BP as well. But if you don't have a BP machine at home, you can check with the capillary refill time. That is basically you press your thumb or any finger for 5 seconds, the nail bed, and release it, and look for the time it takes for the blood to fill the nail back. And if it is taking more than 2 seconds, that is again a danger sign. Okay, and another thing to note is if you have any altered behavior, like if you feel you're getting confused or your behavior has changed in any way, or you feel your speech is altered, anything like that, that is also an emergency sign. And apart from that, other investigations to be done. Yeah, so I think you guys already know about the RT-PCR and the rapid antigen test. So RT-PCR is what is more sensitive. So that is usually the one which is to be taken up. And the rapid antigen is positive only if you have symptomatic. Because RT-PCR basically analyzes the protein of the virus, whereas the antigen just is on the surface of the virus. So what happens is, in the initial stages of the disease, the RT-PCR is able to pick it up far better than the rapid antigen. And you should also get a complete blood count done, because that will help you identify a bacterial cause or a viral cause. Because yeah, that anyway the doctor will help you out. Yeah, and CT scan is usually not advised. CT scan is to be done only when the doctor tells you to do it. Okay, and the CT score is based on the severity of how much your lungs has been affected. So there are different scores they have put. Some hospitals are following out of 25, some are following out of 40. So greater than 12 is considered as, which means your lung is damaged. Up to when it reaches 16, it means 50% of the lungs is damaged. This is out of the 25 score. Okay. Anything else?
Could I ask questions? Could you ask questions now?
Yeah. Nisha.
Okay, this is Swaminathan here. I am from Nico Homes, Bharti City. Sir, in that for the mild case, you prescribe paracetamol 650 mg 4 times a day. There are some doctors who advise that we should not take more than 2 grams of paracetamol a day. So is that dose advisable, 650 mg 4 times a day, unless it's severe fever?
See, no, usually we prescribe 4 times a day. No, the toxic dose is only 4 grams in a day. So anyway, 4 grams, beyond 4 grams, you get severe toxicity in the liver. So 650 milligram 4 times a day is acceptable. It's followed in most hospitals.
Because normally we take that, in fact, a lot of doctors recommend that then the paracetamol 500 4 times a day. So I was just wondering about, Dolo 650 or anything else 4 times a day. That was my concern.
Yeah, no issues. Up to 4 times of 650 is fine.
Okay. The other question I had is, doctor, unless it has become very severe, isn't it better to do, that the person stays at home only rather than being rushed to a hospital ward or something?
Yeah, I'm not saying you should rush to a hospital ward.
That's what we are saying. We are really talking about home care and isolation.
Exactly. That's what I was saying here. I was because.
So that's the topic of today, is really isolate at home, take all these precautions so that you don't have to go to a hospital. Sorry,
because
Dr.
the other concern I had, Nisha ma'am, is this. See, because sometimes if people are, rushed to a hospital when they need not have been rushed to a hospital, that also reduces the availability of hospital beds for those who actually need it.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted the clarification. Thank you. I'll mute myself now.
Yeah, so that's what the topic for today really is. So please do take care of it early stage, be at home, because we don't have to get into a panic for hospital beds. So any other questions for Dr. Amir?
Yeah, hi, this is Meghna. Dr. Amir, you said 50, you said CT score of 15 over 25 in case of 50% lung damage. By damage, you mean a reversible damage, right? Not like a cirrhosis or like a irreversible damage of the lung. So it's still treatable.
Yeah, it is treatable. Saying the extent to which the lung is involved. So with the medication, lung gets clear.
Okay.
Problem thing.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well, thank you.
So, doctor, what about unnecessary tests? Because a lot of doctors are, asking patients to do C-reactive protein and a lot of other tests. So, which obviously adds to the bill and the cost. So, are those required?
Yeah, see, once it gets positive, I mean, that's only required for the moderate and severe cases. So in mild disease, what is mentioned here in the slide, so you basically need a complete blood count mainly. So based on that, the doctor will decide whether, you need further testing. So the other tests which commonly done like C-reactive protein and D-dimer and all, that is not required in the immediate setting. It's only required if you're having more severe symptoms. So then it means your COVID stage has progressed further, which means we'll have to monitor, because this other tests which you might have heard, like the D-dimer and the CRP, those are usually elevated in all inflammation in the body. Any inflammation in the body, that will be elevated. So there's no point in simply doing those tests. So unless you have severe disease, then moderate to severe disease, then those levels will go drastically high. So then you need to get treatment for that.
Thank you.
Like, for example, D-dimer sign of what is it, clot formation in the body, which when it goes beyond a certain level, then you need to get medicines to prevent the clot from further progressing.
Okay. So note that, we are only looking at home isolation, mild cases, that is SpO2 level is above 94%. Once it goes below, then you have to look at more critical tests or treatment, etc., which has to be done in the hospital.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Meghna. Sorry, just 1 minute. I just noticed that I'm working with like 4 patient cases right now. They're all over 60. So these are just cases assigned to me, not through BNP, just through a bunch of other volunteering groups. But I'm just noticing that the doctor's prescriptions are pretty heavy duty, but maybe because they're over 70, but they definitely fall in the mild category. Just a very mild cold and cough, no fever also, but the works: 5-day ivermectin, 5-day dox, 5-day favipiravir, which is FabiFlu, methylprednisone, that's 5-day steroids, plus your 2 weeks of blood thinners. And this is even without getting a lung CT. So there has been a kind of, indiscriminate use of steroids and stuff. But is this something that doctors are prescribing because of the age factor and possibly BP and diabetes alongside?
I would like to add to what Meghna said. Sorry to chip in, doctor. In fact, even here also, in our apartment complex also, we've had one case where people have had mild fever and cough, and they're being prescribed all these steroids and a whole host of medicines. sometimes isn't there a risk of overdoing the medicines even for mild cases?
Yeah, that is there. See, the thing is, the protocol has not been established throughout throughout the state in one way. So each hospital is following its own protocol. For example,
Okay.
actually they used to do the remdesivir protocol for every single patient, irrespective of the symptoms. But now they are shifted to, I mean, treating only the moderate to severe cases with remdesivir, or depending on the severity, the Flavi-Flu protocol. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, what you said is correct. Actually, some patients are getting overtreated, but yeah, so that happens. I mean,
But I also think one of the factors is because there's a 3-day gap like a denial factor, then another 3-day to get the RT-PCR. So in the doctor's defense, I guess it's like you're coming to me on day 7 and day 8, which are the most crucial days. You all are 70 plus, you all do have diabetes, you all do have BP, and I've just got to go all out and try everything possible at this point in time. I don't know. I mean, maybe that could be the case.
Sorry to chip in again, Meghna Swaminathan here. In our case, it was for a couple who were in their late 30s, early 40s. So that's why I found the little overdone there, and all the ivermectin and the Flavi-Flu and all that.
But it's okay. Ivermectin and Fabiflu, if it's just the two of it, it's fine. But here, there are doctors who are prescribing 6 different types and 2 doses of antibiotics. That's like your Claridiol and your Dox or your azithromycin. So 2 courses plus ivermectin, which is an antiparasitic, plus Fabiflu, which is an antiviral, plus what was the other thing?
Steroids.
Plus steroids, methylprednisolone. So that is pretty heavy duty. And if these couples don't have help at home and eating properly and all, I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted to bring this up, that there are
No, that's fine. That's fine. Let's discuss
As
this.
you said, the doctors also panic when the patient comes very late and they don't want to take a risk.
Yes, I guess, Nisha. Yeah.
So, Nisha, this was in my case. Sorry, what I was referring to was in the case of people who had actually gone and taken the test after having 3 days of some fever, cough symptoms. That's all.
Okay.
yeah. One is I mean, the doctor may have auscultated the lungs, and he felt that the lung is, I mean, the sound is lesser. I mean, auscultation, right? So based on that, he might have decided. The drugs you say, that is part of the protocol actually. See, every protocol includes ivermectin health. It's recommended by the Union Health Ministry. So although other places are not, I mean, abroad they are not using it much, but here it's found to be helpful in treating the COVID as well. And Fabiflu is obviously for the virus that is given in, mild to moderate cases. And the antibiotics are given routinely. That is to prevent any additional bacterial infection to get into your body because your immunity gets suppressed. And steroids is to reduce the inflammation because COVID is known to cause a lot of inflammation. And the anti-clotting, which is the antiplatelets, that will be given to prevent clot formation. So these entire drugs are given to moderate to severe and mild to moderate as well as severe cases. Mild cases don't need it, but as you said, in your case, it might be given that.
Hello.
Sorry, lost you, doctor.
Yeah, he went off somewhere.
Dr. Amir, I can't hear you. You're on mute. Sorry.
Hello.
Yeah, I think you went on mute, doctor.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, so I don't know why exactly those cases, I mean, mild cases were given. Maybe the doctor felt they were progressing to moderate to severe cases.
Okay, but there is no harm, right, in taking all these meds at one point in time, as long as it's monitored, your blood sugar is monitored, you're eating well, and you have a caregiver at home. There shouldn't be any issue, right?
Yeah, they will usually monitor your kidney function as well with the creatinine and urea. So if that is normal, you shouldn't have major issues.
In taking all these drugs, the entire cocktail. I do know a lot of people taking the entire cocktail right now, actually, as we speak. So it should be fine.
Yeah, but the thing is, sometimes because all these medicines can be toxic to your kidney and to some extent your liver, so monitor those values on a alternate day basis or every 3 days.
How do we monitor that? You're talking about the CRP test, is it?
No, that is on the LFT and RFT. No, that
Okay.
but done only
Yeah.
for home care cases. This is done for moderate cases.
Okay, fine. So it would help if once they're done with this course, they do an LFT, right? Just to check their liver function and whatever kidney test or something like that.
Yeah.
It would, yeah. Okay, got it. Thank you, doctor.
But it would be good for volunteers to ask the attenders what medications, so that they also are knowledgeable and can ask the doctor, if they need to take all this, or get a second opinion if required, if you're concerned. So don't just, take whatever advice, try and be a little more knowledgeable and ask the right question. So if the volunteer can really consult, inquire with the patient and get all the requisite history details, get the requisite medicines that they're taking, what day did the illness start. You can always reach out to doctors on our panel to get a second advice. While the primary doctor may be recommending this treatment to the patient, you could get that secondary consultation done. Okay, any other questions for Dr. Amir? So we have now then, Mitu will come back and share her experience on home isolation and COVID care centers. Mitu, would you like to take over?
Yes, sure. So I have been with BNP and I have seen cases across, and these are some of my understandings. So with the mild and the moderate patients mostly, that so once you have a few symptoms, first of all, what's necessary is to isolate. And once you are tested, whether you are positive or negative, you can choose between home isolation or COVID care centers, which I'm going to touch upon a little later. Nisha, can you move the slide? So here it is, what I have, when I have spoken to a lot of COVID recovering patients, and I have spoken to the caretakers, that once you are tested positive, you choose whether you want to do home isolation. Definitely, first of all, we have to get in touch with a doctor whom we can trust. Now, this is our personal choice. First, we can go around looking at choosing few doctors from in the initial stages or even later on. But once we have found a doctor, we have to trust the doctor and follow his instructions and his prescriptions. The doctor can check for things, the age of the patient, what medications he's taking, has there been any surgery, any past history, what are the comorbidities. He can suggest a few tests, and based on that, he will decide whether isolation is good or the patient should come to hospital. If we are doing home isolation, it's a good idea to find a dedicated room which has got ample ventilation, and we have been talking about that all the time. It requires some amount of planning. We will have to do some amount of shifting. Whatever things are there inside the room, those things have to be taken out. And if the patient is going to be inside for the next 10 to 15 days, the patient has to take whatever required things to his room and make it such that other things are not going to be exchanged. So whatever arrangements have to be made, whether these are pillows, even to the smallest things like bed sheets and clothes, and everything have to be brought inside the room. The room should have access to a toilet. If there is no access, then every time the patient is using, he should disinfect and sanitize the toilet before leaving. There is a home kit which the doctors will prescribe, and there are certain things that have to be learned and understood by the patient and the caretaker also. It's highly advisable that the patient has a healthy routine. It's important because a lot of patients go through anxiety, they go through depression, they have an array of emotions, loss of appetite, loss of timeliness, there's so many things. The caretaker, therefore, it's necessary that the caretaker is competent. He's available 24 hours and he is able to monitor 24 hours of the day, and he's able to monitor the routine, the food pattern and everything for the patient. The caretaker will require to take some amount of training, whether it is about checking the pulse meter or the oximeter, talking to the doctors, the kind of prescriptions they are given, is being given, what kind of prescription it is, what's going to happen with that. The caretaker is a crucial person here. Additionally, the caretaker can be prescribed some kinds of medication by the doctor as a normal protocol. We don't have to get scared. There are other things that have to be taken care of by the caretaker, like the kind of food, the maintaining hygiene. How are you going to manage the laundry of the patient? How are you going to manage exchange of food, water? Somebody. Vishal, can you please check who's?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So there's a lot of article regarding medical waste and how, how to take care of the biomedical waste.
Can someone be on mute, please? Okay. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Mitu.
Anisha, you have to open the page.
Yeah, I'll do that. Go ahead.
Right. So I have realized that the role of the caretaker is very crucial in this. And we are the ones who come in contact with the caretakers more than anybody else. So once I realized how the patient's relatives kept calling the patient and then, how are you? It's really bad. How can you, come in contact? You must have stepped out of the house. I have told you several times that you have to be careful. Now see what has happened. So they only increase the panic. Then the caretaker realized that I should actually not even allow the relatives and all of those people to come in contact with the patient directly. I will handle, and only those people whom the patient chooses to talk to, I will let them talk to the patient. Nisha, can you please change the slide? Now, if by any chance we realize that the home isolation is not providing the necessary things, like that we cannot have a dedicated room, there is not maybe our other family members are also. Yeah, what happened, Nisha?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the other family members are also infected, and there are then other options like the COVID care centers. Now, I realized that earlier there were a lot of myths around the COVID care centers, and they are dirty, they're not being taken care, the patients are not taken care of, the food is not nice, the toilets are not hygienic. Now, the scenes have changed. There are newer developments, there are different kinds of COVID care centers, and based on our choice, there are COVID care centers which are available free of cost. There are others which are with moderate fees. There are others which charge premium, and they definitely give other kinds of services. There are hotels which have tied up with hospitals. So there are different options that we can have. We have to be logical. We have to understand that going to COVID care center is not going to make you feel more sick. It's meant to make you feel better and get better care, because there are doctors, there are nurses which are available for you 24/7. There are few messages that floated around and I felt are important. So I thought I can share them with you. Can Nisha change the slide? So these go like this. Relative or others are calling. How did this happen? We need not ask such a question. What's better is to ask, how are you? Or don't worry, take this medicine prescribed by my doctor. Now this is such a ruckus spread. The moment other relatives and everybody get to know, they pour in with their own medications, with their own prescriptions. Rather, they should say, don't worry, take rest and follow what your doctor has prescribed. Sometimes we say the hospitals are in such a bad condition, but they are not anymore. So rather say that you don't even require to go to the hospital. Most of the people are getting cured without the hospital treatment. Sometimes patients, relatives call and say that things are so bad outside. I'm really worried for you. We are telling all of this to only increase the panic for the patients and the caretakers. Rather, we'll say things are going to be better. And I am pretty sure about that. I'm worried for you. Instead of saying that, yes, we are definitely worried, but we don't have to always keep using this again and again to only increase the worry for the patient and the caretaker. Rather, it's better to say, I am there for you if you need anything. Our job as relatives and as volunteers is to give them hope, give them help.
May I add something here to what Mitu was saying? This is exactly what happened in our apartment. In fact, we had one flat where people were more on panic. So we just kept calling this, look, guys, we are here for you. You know, take it easy. We'll give you all the help you want. And these people actually, they sort of, they got comforted by what we kept calling them and talking to them about, just discussing things other than the panic. And actually, day before, they actually came out of it. They said, thank you guys so much. We're feeling great. We are now getting 97, 98 without oxygen. So I think it's more, sometimes just telling people that we are there for them in case they need anything helps, rather than simply asking, how are you? That may actually put them under anxiety. I fully agree with what Mitu is saying. We've actually gone through this.
Yes.
We actually had a family which actually went through this, and they actually came out of it day before. For 5 days, they were on panic. And they said, look, guys, we are here for you. Anything you need, you're like part of a family. They're going to look after you like you're a family. They actually came out of it 2 days ago.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
Meghna, you had a question?
Not really, but yeah, I think what you said is spot on, because I just know it's just so important to just shut out media and relatives and family. I mean, obviously your closest, maybe your neighbor should know, or your parents, or an aunt and uncle who's a caregiver. But I think instead of just like telling the whole world about it, because obviously the first response would be they're all going to call you, and the last thing you want when you're coughing and when you've got these when you're symptomatic is to answer people's calls or WhatsApp messages and things like that. So people, I mean, they don't know otherwise also, right? That's just how we react to this. So I think it also starts with us. We shouldn't tell the whole world, because then we're going to get all that sympathy, and then we've got to deal with it, and that will delay our whole recovery process and will add to the anxiety. So it's just important to keep it very low-key, and maybe share what you've been through once you're out of it. But I think at the start, keep it a little low-key, and then if we know people who are sick, like you said, just ask how we could like be of any help, but not add to their anxiety.
I fully agree with this. I fully agree with this.
Yeah.
In fact, in one COVID center, we've not allowed any news channels and any bad news, because otherwise a lot of these pictures of crematoriums and other patients struggling for oxygen is sort of
senseless. They're senseless. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was really bad. Actually, I've also been through this, but I just cut off. But also because I am a science major, and I kind of knew my meds, and I kind of just figured that, okay, I could deal with this without any panic or all of that. But that was right when the burning funeral pyres, and when you're talking about happy hypoxia and all these articles, so it can get
and all this stuff now.
It can be really bad, but I just think now I think things are definitely changing, because we're on field volunteers. We know exactly what's happening. I know the CMO of St. John's, he's saying there has been a lull in admissions. We can clearly see through our volunteering groups, patient requests have decreased. So things are changing. I'm not sure because the cases have decreased, or if the system has gotten its act in place, or if people have learned to react to this a lot better, given the resources available. But yes, anxiety is a really, really big factor in all of this. And I don't think it is important to know how that person contracted COVID. It is such an irrelevant question, given it's in the air or whatever. And
I agree completely.
It's such an irrelevant question right now. So it's just important. Like, I mean, your presentation is really spot on. It's just important to say that, okay, we are here for you if you require anything, and we should back off, maybe once in a couple of days ask or something, but then I think just back off a little also.
Spot on.
No,
Great.
I want to
Yeah.
add one thing. No, and one more thing is that like every patient we are in the hospital, right? So the when you give positive feedback, that those patients actually heal faster when they don't panic. I mean, if you reinforce that they're doing well and they will be getting better, those patients actually get better faster.
So true.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctor, for saying that, for clarifying that. Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much.
So great. So I guess what we want to say is that we've done a lot. Our team has done a lot of research and verification. We have a lot of home care setups, which we have published on the Google Drive. Or if you want to reach out, you can let us know. Unfortunately, though, many of them are quite expensive, so most people can't afford it. So the nursing costs have increased to 5 to 8,000 a day. So it's ridiculously expensive, many of them, but there are some good options too. So the best option, though, recently, as Mitu has said, is the COVID care centers that have come up. It's very sad to see that so many beds are available. There's so much investment being put in. Site Care and Canadian International have got a very good facility for SpO2 levels, which are below 90%. So you can go for oxygen support, and they are not fully occupied. They have 150 beds. St. Joseph's College has opened up for the underprivileged and the poor, but people are still scared and still not coming forth. They're worried about, because they've heard such gory stories, or they're worried in some cases about human trafficking or even leaving their families. So please, as volunteers, if you find any case, please encourage them to come forward, get isolation. The facilities will give them full support, free of cost, good food, good health, airy, even engagement activities, yoga, a lot of different things that are being supported through these centers. And I can share with you more material, photos of and experiences of people who've actually benefited by going to these isolation setups.
Could I ask
So-
one question with Dr. Amarpreet? This is on the medical side. Doctor, I'm hearing quite quite a few in our social media. I mean, we have our own apartment groups. People are saying that sometimes RT-PCR is not reliable and that they should go for a CT scan. My one concern which I have here is, if people go for a CT scan too often, is that firstly, is it that the RT-PCR is less reliable and CT scan is more reliable? One question. Second question is, if people make it a habit of going for a CT scan, are they not increasing the radiation risk?
Yeah, both of them are true what he said. So basically, in the RT-PCR sensitivity, which is the rate of picking up the positive cases, that is close to 80%. So in between, there was a discussion among the government that RT-PCR may not be as effective and we should directly go for a CT scan. But the AIMS people have the AIMS medical head, he has clarified that CT scan without any necessary is too much radiation. Like one CT scan is equivalent to 100 X-rays. So that is too much radiation exposure. So I would advise not to go for any CT scan unless a doctor advises you to take one.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the clarification, sir.
Any other questions?
Yes, sorry. This is Meghna again. Doctor, now with the Coviself, which is the rapid antigen test that is going to be available over the counter from next month onwards, I know that's not 100% foolproof, but at least it will help in identifying immediately if you do have COVID, and you can start your meds right away on day 1 or day 2 itself, right? This is I'm talking about the rapid antigen test by MyLab, which will be launched next month.
Yeah, so that one actually, that works only if you have symptoms.
Yes,
So
yes, yeah.
So if you're having symptoms, you can go ahead for that. And if it is coming positive, it has like a 95% negative predictive value.
Mhm.
Which means if it is positive, you definitely most of 95% of the time you actually have the disease.
Yes, yes. And I
So-
mean, if you're still if you turn negative but you're symptomatic, then you can go ahead and do your RT-PCR for kind of more sensitivity or something. But don't
Yeah.
you think that will really help? I mean, if they implement this at our airports and our railway stations and all of that, because right now we don't even have a 14-day quarantine like the rest of the countries. People are flying into Bangalore and then just walking in, right? Without a 14-day quarantine period. So if they implement the RAT everywhere, it would at least, I mean, you'd know that someone has COVID and then that person can be isolated or seek treatment or whatever.
No, but RT works only for those who are symptomatic. So he's saying to do the test for those who are symptoms.
Okay, only symptomatic, is it? So at the airports and all, it won't really make a difference.
Most of the time it comes negative actually. Because see what happens, rapid antigen actually works based on rejecting the antigen from your aspirate. Whereas RT-PCR,
Yes.
what it does is it takes the aspirate and then in what do you say? RT-PCR is the enzyme which converts the RNA of the virus into DNA, and then you
Correct, yeah.
amplify multiple times. So initially 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, like that. Okay, 4 becomes 8.
Yeah.
1. So it amplifies really rapidly. So then after a number of cycles of multiplying, you can detect a significant amount of virus. Okay,
So you're saying that, yeah, sorry, go on.
amount, RT-PCR can pick it up because you're amplifying it so many times. Whereas antigen only picks it up when you have a significant amount of virus in your swab. So only then
Okay.
so when you have significant amount, only then you get the symptoms. So antigen works only when you have symptoms usually.
Okay, but for all of those who are at home right now in denial, not submitting their nasal swab and all, they could just do this at home, right? For like symptomatic patients.
Yeah, they can.
Okay, all right.
They can, and if it is coming positive, obviously you are positive, and then you
Yeah.
can home care principles. And if it is negative, then probably I would suggest wait for 1 or 2 days to make sure that, or you can get a CBC done, the complete blood count.
Yeah.
And then if the symptoms are still not improving, then probably get an RT-PCR done.
Okay, fine. Yeah, hi everyone. This is what the ICMR released a couple of days ago. So this is that the Coviself RAT, which will be $250 and will be available over the counter, I think in the next 2 weeks or something like that.
The home test, is it? That's
Yes, it's a home test. It's just a little kit, that you can just do by yourself at home. I think this will really solve a lot of issues right now. I mean, it's just one of the other things that we could adopt.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question with regard to what Meghna was saying just now and what Dr. Amir is clarifying. See, this makes it easy and convenient having this home kit. But the flip side is if people have not, used their home kit properly, and they sometimes end up getting a positive result when it actually is not positive, won't that actually, isn't there a chance of that fanning panic in the family?
You're saying this self-test at home, it could be...
Yes, Nisha. What I'm saying is, suppose someone picks up one of these self-test kits, and I'm just looking at a hypothetical situation, and suppose someone has actually used this, they've done a self-test, but they have, for some reason, we're all new to it. Who was going to do it is going to do it the first time. Suppose they haven't done it properly for whatever reason, either it wasn't, they weren't probably given instructions or whatever. But if for some reason, if it wasn't done properly, and they end up getting a positive result, won't that create a panic in the family at home? Like suppose one person does it, then one more does it, then suddenly people say, oh my God, 2 of us are positive. Won't that fan a panic at home?
Dr. Amir, can that happen? Can it say positive even when you've not done it properly?
Are there false positives? I don't know.
But false negative is possible.
Yeah, false negative is possible. I don't think false positive anyway.
Anyway, it's always better to be more careful and, rather than not do it. It's better to do it, I would think.
Okay.
So I thought I'll just end with a short video, which sort of sums up, whatever we've been talking about quite nicely.
Only 6% of people affected with COVID need hospitalization. If our country needs to deal with only this 6%, our death rate would be far below what it is today, and medical care would be available for those who need it. Let's look at the 94% who are affected with COVID and what is their best option. You are tested positive and you have either no symptoms or very mild symptoms, like a cold, cough, fever, body pains, weakness. This means that your immunity is working well against the virus and keeping it under control. And in a matter of 1 week to 10 days, all these symptoms will settle down. You may develop a loss of smell and taste along the way, but you will recover without any complication with simple over-the-counter medications like Dolo 650, home remedies, Ayurveda, and homeopathy. Be in constant telephonic touch with your family doctor. Keep him informed on a daily basis. I have treated over 1,300 people this way successfully. I strongly believe that over 94% of the people affected with COVID can be treated this way. Where are we going wrong? RT-PCR is the main test for diagnosing COVID, and it is only about 65 to 70% accurate, which means the 30-35% may be positive, but will still show as negative. Not testing for COVID. Let us assume that every cold, cough, fever that happens to us now is COVID. We isolate ourselves and follow the rules which are laid down by the government, and we treat it as I have advised above and be done with it in a week or 10 days time. Testing for COVID. Once you're tested positive for COVID, you follow the above line of treatment and be done with it in 1 week to 10 days time. But this is possible only in 10% of those who have tested positive. Let me explain what happens to the rest 90% who are tested positive. Panic. With the second wave hitting us hard and the fear surrounding it, the moment you are tested positive, all hell breaks loose. You are flooded with advice from relatives, friends, colleagues, each one telling you their experiences and all the gory details from the news and the social media, and you get scared. You hardly have any symptoms, but the moment you know you are positive and you hear all their advice, you start to panic. When you panic, your breathing pattern changes. You breathe shallow, and in doing so, you pull carbon dioxide in your lungs, and you begin to feel breathless. You are told that the lungs are getting affected, but the fact is that your anxiety is what is causing your breathlessness. Now you are asked to do the following investigations: a D-dimer, a C-reactive protein, and a CT scan of the chest. A D-dimer. Elevated levels of D-dimer are associated with any inflammation and any disease activity. It is only when the levels are extremely high it indicates a clotting problem. C-reactive protein. A high level of C-reactive protein in the blood is a marker of any inflammation. It can be caused by a wide variety of conditions. Both the above tests are not specific for COVID. They are just supportive evidence of inflammation and infection. CT scan of the chest. More than 80% of the COVID patients show ground glass appearance in their CT scan. The moment you see the report, everyone says that your lungs are involved and you're in trouble. But that's not true. The COVID virus has a tendency to affect the lungs and to produce inflammatory changes in the lungs. Ground glass opacity is not specific to COVID. It is seen in many inflammations and infections. These, in most cases, resolve on their own. Now, your doctor starts you on an antiviral, remdesivir, which the WHO says is not effective against COVID, then an antibiotic, and then a steroid is added to the prescription to be on the safe side. Remember, when you are in panic, your doctor who is treating you will also go into panic and ask you to get admitted. After all, he's human and he's answerable for you. What you need to understand is that your immunity is doing a great job in containing the COVID virus. That is why you hardly have any symptoms. All these medicines are very strong and have a lot of side effects. When you consume these, they together crush your natural immunity. which is doing a great job, and you begin to get worse. Your condition deteriorates and you end up in the hospital. The medical system is doing its best, but it is overwhelmed and in the process of collapsing. You need to use your common sense and logic and decide which way you want to deal with the COVID when you get affected by it. The authorities are now saying that COVID is spreading through the air and not a droplet infection anymore, which means the spread is very fast. The way the second wave is hitting us, the chances are that most of us at some time or the other is going to get affected by the COVID. And by then, we need to be ready with our choice. By choosing option 1, there is a high chance that you will be done with the COVID without even realizing that you had COVID. You will not invite panic and unnecessarily stress and hospitalization. You will not unnecessarily block hospital beds and leave them to the 6% who truly needs them. The choice is yours. Take care.
So, thank you everyone for listening patiently to us, and hope this was useful for you.
Thank you for having organized this, Nisha ma'am, and Mitu and everybody. Thank you so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
For your time, and Mitu. Okay, take care, and please do reach out to us if you have any questions or need any help. And if you can get any patients to the COVID care center so that we can get them treated early.
Hey, thank you, Mitu. Thank you, everyone. Doctor, it was a nice session, informative and interactive as well. Looking forward for such sessions. Thank you, everyone. And the recording, everything will be available. See, in the chat window, I have actually published the URL where people can subscribe to BNP videos YouTube channel. It's youtube/c/nammabnp.blr. I have added there in the chat window. Please do subscribe. This video will be up by evening. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lalitamba.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you all.